Tonight, on True Crime Talk, Ellen Greenberg was found dead in her locked apartment in 2011 with over 20 stab wounds, initially ruled a homicide, then later changed to a suicide by the medical examiner, a ruling her family disputes and continues to fight through civil lawsuits and appeals. On January 26, 2011, Greenberg's fiancé, Samuel Goldberg, discovered her body in their apartment after finding the door secured with a swing latch and forcing it open. A recent ABC News documentary, Death in Apartment 603, explores the controversial case, her family's quest for answers, and new details emerging in the legal battle to have the manner of death changed. Ellen Greenberg was found with more than 20 stab wounds, injuries that many believe indicated foul play. The medical examiner initially ruled the death a homicide. The manner of death was later changed to suicide by the medical examiner, Dr. Osborne, a decision that her family, the Greenbergs, has fought against ever since. The Greenberg family filed a civil lawsuit, and the fight to have the manner of death changed from suicide to an undetermined cause has been a long and difficult one. Josh Shapiro, from 2017 to 2023, served as the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Today, he is the 48th governor of Pennsylvania. At the time of Ellen Greenberg's death, Mr. Shapiro was a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. In July of 2022, the internet community uncovered relationships between Josh Shapiro and the families of Samuel Goldberg and James Schwartzman, prompting the Attorney General's office to send the case to the Chester County, Pennsylvania District Attorney's Office to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. The case has seen recent developments, with a judge ruling that a second lawsuit could proceed to a jury trial. In February 2025, following a lawsuit from Greenberg's parents, a settlement was reached in which Greenberg's death would be reinvestigated. The pathologist that originally ruled the case a suicide, Dr. Osborne, signed a document stating he amended his position on the cause of her death, no longer considering it a suicide. He wrote, quote, "It is my professional opinion Ellen's manner of death should be designated as something other than suicide," end quote. Since Osborne is no longer employed by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, his statement does not have any influence on the official death certificate. On Monday, September 29, 2025, ABC News premiered Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg, a series that examines the controversy surrounding her death. The documentary can be seen on Hulu. The documentary and recent legal filings have brought to light new details, including testimony from Dr. Osborne, who discussed the factors leading to his decision to change the manner of death, and evidence regarding the security guard's presence and witness accounts of Goldberg forcing the door open before finding Ellen. So now, everything is in question. We are joined today by award-winning filmmaker Nancy Schwartzman here on True Crime Talk. She is the director and showrunner of Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg. This is going to be a 3-part docuseries coming to you very soon. In fact, let's kick things off with that, Nancy. When can the listeners expect to have this docuseries available? And are they dropping it one episode at a time, or are we getting all 3 parts at the same release?
We will get all 3 parts at once, and the series premieres on Hulu September 29th. So in a few days, and it's Hulu or Disney Plus. You will be able to watch all 3 episodes on Monday.
And this is an incredibly complex story to tell. And I think that lends itself to requiring 3 parts to tell it. Take our listeners into some of the details about this case, because what you have here is this is a case that people have grabbed onto. Once you learn the skeleton of the case, you are intrigued, and a lot of people outraged at what was going on early in this story. And your docuseries is going to be following the family, as I understand it, but it all starts with the mystery of what happened inside of that apartment 603, after a blizzard hits the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah. So the story centers on a young woman, 27 years old, Ellen Greenberg, who, by all accounts, is really well loved by everyone. She's an only child. She's very close with her parents, but she's also independent and living her best life outside of Philly with a big circle of friends. And she's a first grade teacher. Her students love her. Her colleagues love her. And she's living with her fiance, and they're going to get married. And they just send out save the dates. Ellen was known to be really charismatic and fun and, caring, would make leftovers, would bring leftovers to the concierge in the building. Just super generous to everyone who knew her, very upbeat and bubbly. And her friends definitely noticed a change in her. She became withdrawn. She became anxious. She was telling her parents that she wanted to come home. They were worried about, especially Dad was worried about her losing her job. And he said, please see a psychiatrist, get some help before you move home to Harrisburg. We don't want you to lose your job. You worked really hard to get this job. So Ellen, had sent out the save the dates. She's getting married. She has a few sessions with the psychiatrist. She's feeling better. Her anxiety is reducing. Her concerned aunt, who's really like a best friend, was like, it wasn't our usual Ellen, but she did seem to be doing better. And then all of a sudden on this blizzard day, it's a snow day, Ellen makes sure all the kids get home. She and her fiance, he's not working because of the snow, or he's off work for the season or something, but they're home together. The fiance goes to the gym. He comes back, and he's locked out of the apartment with one of those like sort of latches that are in hotels.
Yep.
He says he's concerned. He sends a string of text messages to her, and eventually makes his way into the apartment.
The text messages, sorry to jump in here, but the text messages, after reviewing those, and he says he's concerned, but when you read those, what was your reaction to reading those text messages? Because to me, it's like, yeah, he sounds concerned, but he also sounds really pissed off that this door is locked and nobody's letting him in.
Yeah, they're pretty aggressive. The messages are increasingly kind of angry, like, you better have an excuse. You have no idea. I didn't see one message that says, are you okay?
Right.
Did you fall in the shower? Did you hurt yourself? Are you all right? I'm getting concerned.
Yeah. Oh my God, what's going on? How, it seems more that his concern is not being able to get into that door. He sounds more angry than concerned.
Right. So Ellen is discovered on the scene. It's bloody. There's a knife sticking out of her heart. And he calls 911, and says my fiance committed suicide and that she fell on a knife. So then, I mean, the series really tracks this whole chain of events of all the things that kind of went wrong or didn't happen in the investigation. EMTs arrive and say, all right, well, you don't need us because we can't revive her. This is a homicide. EMT says that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the beat cops show up, and it's a very low crime area. It's Manayunk, and which is outside of Philadelphia. Philadelphia at the time was a very high homicide city, but this is a sort of little, it's not a suburb exactly, but it's a very low crime part of town. So they see a fiance who's distressed and says, oh, she was having mental issues. I was locked out. She committed suicide. And they just take him at his word, which is really not good investigation, especially for a very bloody scene.
Are you sure? I thought at the police academy that they taught everybody that when you show up to a scene, whatever they tell you, whatever the people on the scene tell you, that's exactly what happened. Don't they teach that like the first week at police academy? Like nobody ever lies, police officers.
I think in the movie Police Academy, that's maybe what they learned. But yeah, question everything, right? Not in a conspiratorial way, but in a just common sense way. The medical examiner, who used his medical background and common sense, does an examination of her body and rules it a homicide. So the family is getting whiplash here. They hear Ellen took her life. No one can believe it. None of the friends believe it. It does not make sense to them at all. And then at the funeral, they find out it's actually been ruled a homicide. And then that's where things get interesting. It's when the police and the medical examiner start to conflict with each other. Police are saying suicide, medical examiner saying homicide. And, if you watch the series, you'll see a whole chain of events that occurs that really muddies the waters throughout any ability to investigate. And then, it's determined and discovered that Ellen had 20 stab wounds, 10 in the front and 10 in the back. None of that really aligns with suicide. Also, if you know anything about Ellen, she was very neat. She did not like pain. This just doesn't add up with who she is and who she was, but a proper investigation was never done. So the series really tracks the family's 14-year saga for justice for their daughter. Yeah.
And their battle was incredible. Before we get to that, I want to ask you about Samuel Goldberg, about him, about his family. Could you clue us in on, because they're living in, from my understanding, I don't know how many floors it is, but it's a high-rise apartment type setup. This is a higher end area. They're living in a nice apartment where you have, like you said, concierge, you have some form of security. And so while living in a low crime area, they're living in a building that has security precautions that most of us don't have. So tell us a little bit about the apartment and a little bit about Samuel Goldberg and his family.
Yeah. So Ellen and Sam are living, we film in the lofts. So we went back to the building.
Did you get inside the actual apartment?
Yes, we got inside the actual apartment. So you'll see that in episode 3. It is a really cool loft building, 2-bedroom. It's not high security, but it's a lot of young professionals living there, couples. It's funky and I would say affordable. It's not like a luxury building, but it's like a lovely place to kind of do your first nesting with your fiance. It's a great like post-college, post-couple college apartments to your kind of first grown-up apartment, Mm-hmm. And it is on the 6th floor and there's no balcony. So unless you're Spider-Man, you're not getting in that building just because of the design of it. and it's off a main drag. It's nowhere near like a main drag or any other roof, so people aren't going to be breaking in from anywhere. And it's just a really like nice place to live. There were, a defense attorney as a neighbor, young couples and stuff. So the building was really nice and decently secure. They had a login system and a front desk, so you can't just walk in, and they track who's coming and going. So that's where Ellen and Sam lived, and that's the 6th floor apartment where Ellen was found dead. So Sam's family is, they are an upper middle class family living outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when this goes down, he breaks down the door. He finds Ellen, as he says. He calls medical personnel, calls for help, but he's very quickly on the phone with his family as well.
Yes, he's made calls. He's made a bunch of calls, including to Sandy, Ellen's mom, saying, Ellen's not picking up. Is she doing her homework with headphones on? Like, he makes a bunch of calls, some of which we know, some of which we don't, because his call log is redacted and we cannot see who he called. We do know that he spoke with his uncle before calling 911. His uncle is a prominent attorney, or was a prominent attorney in Philadelphia. So we know he spoke with his uncle. We also know that he called Ellen multiple times, and we know that he called Ellen's mom before 911. So, yeah.
Ellen's family, her mother, her father, are going to take up this, what is almost an impossible battle, to get a medical examiner to overturn previously, it was, as you said, there's a disagreement between law enforcement and the medical personnel that are saying, hey, suicide versus homicide. They get it switched to suicide, but now the parents are going to have to, there's no death investigation. There's no murder investigation unless we have it ruled a homicide. And the Greenbergs want to file a wrongful death suit, to not for the purpose of making money, but for the purpose of getting somebody to look at their daughter's case and investigate what really happened, and is somebody responsible for why she is dead. So that's a very complex portion of the story that you have to tell in the documentary. Give us kind of the nuts and bolts of it here a little bit, because it's an uphill battle, to say the least, right? It's a very lengthy, expensive uphill battle.
Yeah. I mean, the parents have been fighting for years to get the truth and get a proper investigation. Throughout their journey, they, first team up with Thomas Brennan, a private investigator who dedicates years of his life analyzing the autopsy photos and the reports, and says, you know what? The way the blood has moved on Ellen's face, dried and coagulated, shows that she was lying on her back, because the blood drips from the corner of her mouth down towards the floor if she's lying on her back, but her body was found seated, propped up. So, number one, basic detective work, he says, this appears as though the body was moved, because the way the blood has dried on her body defies gravity. The family didn't have it in them to look at those photographs, and they're not detectives, and they're not law enforcement, and they're not lawyers, right? So they're just regular parents who are in a state of shock and trauma. And luckily they connect with Thomas Brennan, who worked for, he was working for the state of Pennsylvania as a trooper for 20 plus years. He gets involved. They end up meeting someone in the district attorney's office who's able to find her file. It's not filed under law enforcement because it was then deemed a suicide. So they get a handle on the file, and the assistant DA, who looks at all this stuff often, many different cases, puts the file together and notices a lot of inconsistencies. He listens to the 911 call. He shares it with a private investigator, and that call just raises so many questions for both of them. They move on to really dig into, the chain of custody being broken at the scene, which means Ellen's phone and laptops were taken out of the crime scene for 2 days, which is really questionable and problematic. Law enforcement should have held the scene. They should have certainly preserved that technology. But why the tech is important is that the DA's office, the Attorney General's office, cites searches found on the computer that point to suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And we know the chain of custody on that computer was broken, number one. And number two, the FBI in their original assessment of her technology says there's nothing unusual on it. So what happened? And I just think that, through their process, you see the photographs, you see her body. They also learned that Ellen's body had bruises on it in various stages of healing, which means it didn't happen on the night of her death. It was happening over time. So at the very least, that needs to be questioned. That needs to be taken seriously. If a woman's body has bruises on it, you need to investigate it. Now, Ellen was a first grade teacher, and her colleagues kind of say the same thing. Like, if there's a student in your class that has bruises, you need to ask questions, right? Like, it's a really big warning sign, and none of that was done. So there's just, the crime scene wasn't held, and therefore it was cleaned. So when law enforcement gets the designation for the medical examiner that he thinks that this is a homicide, they rush back to the scene, the apartment, but it's already been professionally cleaned. So it's really kind of a disaster in a way. It's like the first 48 hours is completely tainted on every level. Doesn't mean it's not salvageable, but it's really not handled well. The technology is not handled well. The scene isn't handled well. The crime, the murder weapon or the death weapon, let's say, the knives are in the dishwasher, totally clean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the trash chutes weren't looked at. What was thrown away from this apartment?
That's what I was going to ask you. Where was the trash chute in relation to the front door of their apartment? Because
it was down the hall, and it wasn't scavenged.
Like in a utility closet, or just in the hall?
Yeah, it's like a loft building. So you walk down the hall and you open the closet and you put it in the chute.
Yeah, and I thought, because we see him on camera, so if there were, the way that this plays out, if he is responsible for what happened to Ellen, then what his part in that would have had to, a large part of that would have had to take place before he goes down to the gym. And we see him on camera at times, and he's not covered in blood. Right. And so he would have had to, the timing of this is tight. Yeah. But there is enough time there. But he would have had to have cleaned up and then managed to get rid of those bloody clothes, because the police, while they, didn't do the most thorough of jobs, let's say, they arrive on the scene and they do say that they searched the apartment, correct? They're looking around, or at least a cursory search.
Yeah. They said crime scene cleanup.
Yeah.
They certainly didn't go in with the kind of forensic examination, even 2 days later, which would have been helpful. Examine the lock, examine how it broke, examine, all of that. They certainly didn't photograph Ellen at the scene thoroughly and properly. They didn't discover that there were 10 stab wounds in her back. But even after the cleanup, you could have gone in with luminol all over the apartment, everywhere. And, it's tricky because, right, the knife had Ellen's DNA, but Sam and Ellen lived together. So I'm sure, Sam's all over that apartment. But where else is there blood? Is there blood in the bedroom?
Yep.
Is there blood in the bathroom? Like, they just didn't treat it as a homicide day of or even properly afterwards. So, yeah, a lot of things were not handled well, and we sort of track all of those discoveries through the course of the series.
I love that you mentioned Trash Chute, because that when we covered it on True Crime Garage, I mean, you spend 2 weeks eyeballs deep in a case, and it scrambles your brain by the time you get to tell the story, because you've thought about it and looked at it and tried to solve it and pick it apart from every single angle. And I missed the Trash Chute. It was right there, and it was like 3 days later, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like, jumped off the couch and, oh my God, the Trash Chute. They
never checked the trash, right? Yeah. They didn't thoroughly. So wouldn't you scour the apartment and kind of take everything out of it? And wouldn't you check, it's a big building, it's a big job, right? You'd have to check all the trash in the building, but that's why you became a detective.
That's why you became a detective, because you like doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so when you show up and it's not a shack that the assault took place in, or the homicide took place in, it's this big, large building. And now, hey, you get to do every detective thing you can think of in this building. Right. It's going to be a blast. But no, they apparently, I don't know if they're afraid of the paperwork or if they had to get back to the office in a hurry. But you worked a good deal with the family, with Ellen's family on this docuseries.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us like beyond what we know about the family from what we can read online. Tell us about their personalities, and tell us about your interactions with them, and how long was the process of putting together the docuseries with them involved?
Yeah, Sandy and Josh are just incredibly resilient people, and no family should have to go through this. They haven't even had a chance to grieve their daughter, Josh is like this big bear of a guy, and he loves his daughter and wants to do right by her and is never going to give up. And Sandy's like this teeny tiny lady who's also never going to give up. They just messed with the wrong parents. Mm-hmm. And they somehow thought they were simple because they're from Harrisburg or something. They're small town people that are just going to take this designation and get buried in either their sadness or paperwork. And none of that is true. They are fighters. And, Sandy's like everyone's mom. She's very sweet. And Josh is definitely a character, but I think they're incredibly relatable as parents, and people really, their heart goes out to them. No one should have to go through with this. It's one thing to lose a child in a brutal manner, which is horrifying. It's another thing to be sort of lied to repeatedly, dragged from left turn to right turn to homicide, suicide, like all of these, I don't even want to say twists and turns, because that's story language, but it's just like head swiveling changes that deeply impact their lives. So they just are really resilient, and you'll meet them in the series.
Thank you to Nancy Schwartzman for joining us on True Crime Talk. Go and watch Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg. Available now on Hulu. And for more great true crime, go to wildbluepress.com. And for more great true crime talk, join us again next week. Good night.